Sulemana Braimah, shouldn't this be an unfettered access really to the courts? This is what we need, right? I mean, it will promote transparency in our courts, but a healthy relationship between the court itself and the citizens. Should we put in place rules that may tend to restrict access? Sule, please, if you don't mind unmuting for me. I think you've muted now. I can hear you.
Sorry.
Yes, I can hear you now, yes.
I think any processes that would allow the citizenry to have a full picture of whatever is happening within our governance architecture is an important exercise. But what is also important is the procedural mechanisms that we have to put in place to ensure that in trying to promote transparency, accountability, and all of that, we don't end up also compromising the fundamental principles about trials and procedures in our courts. And I say so because, I mean, of course, Ghana is not an island. And in terms of even our judiciary, I think we borrow quite a lot from the Commonwealth. We borrow quite a lot from the English practices. And then, of course, we also learn from what is happening in places like the US and so on. If you look at the US today, I think a number of states have actually made a provision that allows for cameras in the courtrooms, as they would call it, because traditionally, press journalists have always been allowed into the courtrooms. And I mean, newspaper journalists have always been allowed. And in this case, if you're talking about maybe persons who write for online, I think it is also allowed. What traditionally has been forbidden, in quotes, has been the use of cameras, maybe taking photographs, filming, and all of that. But today in the United States, quite a number of states have made provisions that allow for that, except that in those circumstances, there are procedural mechanisms in place that journalists and those who would seek to film would have to abide by. And that is important because we're talking about, for example, in the 60s, if you read the literature, there was a US case where the judges thought that, look, this is an important matter. We should have the cameras in there, let the people of America follow the case and all of that. And in the end, the Supreme Court upheld an appeal by the convict who said that given the activities of cameramen and how, you know, the media was basically conducting themselves in the courtrooms, it ended up denying him a fair trial. And the Supreme Court upheld that. You know, again, if you look at one of, I think, the most classic cases on matters related to whether or not we should have the cameras in the courtrooms is the O.J. Simpson case. You know, relating to the alleged murder of a spouse and all of that. And the cameras were allowed into the courtroom. And what then happened was that people say, well, the presence of the cameras and how the media people conducted themselves basically confirmed the cautionary admonitions that you know, those who are opposed to that practice would always put forward. Because they claim that during the trial, because of the cameras and so on, the trial basically devolved into, you know, undignified media circus, which then became a perfect fodder for comedy routines, late night programs, and so on and so forth, which then affected the credibility of the trial, even as the purpose was letting people follow what was happening. So I think it is important, but we can't jump into it and say, oh, it will be good for us to learn about what happens in the courtrooms. Yes, it is, but we need to go through the processes and the procedures. Maybe it has to be gradual. As we have started important high-profile cases, we can allow the cameras into the courtrooms, learn from, and then build the fundamental pillars that will be needed to ensure that the process will not be abused. And in the end, justice, you know, delivery will not also be compromised.